Let's move to Maine. I'm Mark Erickson. Today we're talking with Century 21 Northeast Samia Realty Group, Brian Samia. Hello, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Real estate is almost never a bad investment, and you've sort of carved out a niche in a specific area in the great state of Maine, Sanford and Springvale. Full disclosure, I will tell you up front, my grown daughter and my son-in-law and my youngest granddaughter live in the Sanford area, and I got to be honest with you, they got a lot of house for not a lot of money. Is that typical in the market?
Yeah, that's very typical for Sanford. We see a lot of homeowners from the seacoast area of Maine and New Hampshire move to Sanford because of affordability.
Talk a little bit about the market itself, the Sanford community and Springvale, and what the differences are between those two.
So Sanford and Springvale they're all one city. It's just a differentiator because of the zip code. So Springvale has its own zip code. At one point in time, many decades ago, it was its own town. But for municipality purposes, they joined together over 150 years ago. And we have one city government and one town, one school system. So there's really no difference between the two other than zip code.
The high school is a relatively new facility and has a rather innovative trade school component to it as well in Sanford, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. So over the last decade, Sanford has invested in the state of Maine has invested along with Sanford probably close to $150 million into the schools. Actually, it might be closer to $175 million. The central to that was the development of a brand new high school technical center. It incorporates, the everyday learning that students in high school need, along with trades, and kids are graduating right from high school with licenses and trades and things like firefighting, EMT, first response, CNA programs, all of the electrical, plumbing, building trades, as well as even welding. So you name it, auto mechanic, graphic design. So kids are leaving Sanford from high school and able to go right into a trade if that's the direction that they want to go. Along with that redevelopment, the old high school was converted and upgraded and now serves as our middle school. So it's a 5th through 8th grade middle school. And Sanford also consolidated its elementary schools into 3 pre-K through 4th grade elementary schools. And they all offer now the same amenities such as separate cafeterias and gyms and playgrounds. So we have 3 nice facilities throughout town for the younger kids.
Century 21 Northeast Samia Realty Group specializes in multifamily properties. Talk a little bit about the multifamily real estate market in Sanford, Springvale.
Multifamilies in Sanford it's a pretty active market. Was going through just kind of looking at what's going on in the market this morning. As a whole in Sanford, in the last year, about 30 multifamilies have sold in Sanford, and that's consistent with last year where 30 multifamilies sold as well. So the market's very consistent. We have a median sales price in that market of about $425. So that's what makes Sanford attractive to investors and to owner occupants with the multifamily side of things is that it's really the affordability of the property. So you have a really strong municipality, great school system, a really good central government in Sanford, a lot of amenities. 45 minutes to an hour from both Portland and Portsmouth and about 90 minutes to Boston. So there's a lot geographically that's positive about Sanford as well. But the median sales price in Sanford when it comes to single family houses and multifamily houses tends to be $200,000 plus or minus below the towns that are 20 or 30 minutes away that are closer to the 95 corridor. So it opens people up to being able to, one, afford to purchase, and two, to get a lot more house for their money than they can in towns that are closer to the coast and to 95.
And I want to be sure I have this right. You said the median price for a multifamily property in Sanford is $425,000?
Yep, $425,000. That was very consistent for 2024 and 2025.
So using that median price figure, describe what the property would be like for that money.
For that money, you're going to get into a duplex that's in very good condition. It could be a newer stock duplex. There's several that were built in the 80s and 90s that are side-by-side duplexes, or it might be something that offers a little bit more square footage that's part of our older stock housing, but have been, is in a really good location, or might have more amenities like a garage, or, just very well updated probably for that price. You're also going to start to enter into like the 3-family market, but it's probably going to be a building that, it's going to be in reasonable condition, but there probably are going to be some updates that a building selling at 425 will need if it's a 3-family. So slightly above that will be 4-family buildings selling, in the high 4s to low 5s is where those tend to start.
So for something like the duplex property that you described, and we said it at the top of the podcast here, real estate is almost never a bad investment. Is this a good investment for somebody that's doing this for the first time?
I see a lot of duplex purchasers actually be first-time homebuyers or homebuyers that are looking to offset the cost of their mortgage and expenses with income coming in from the other side. So for duplexes, that tends to be the overwhelming majority of purchases will be first-time homebuyers. So people will buy that. It offsets their expenses, and then later in life, it becomes something that they can, or as they mature in what they want for their home ownership. Sometimes they'll sell that duplex. So it's been a good investment because they've been able to earn some equity over the time of owning that as opposed to having rented. Or 2, they'll continue to own that duplex and they'll rent out the side they were living in. And now it becomes an investment property for them long term. And they've locked into it at the prices that they were able to purchase it at, whether it be 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. Personally, how I got started in my real estate investing about 23 years ago, I bought my first building. It happened to be a 3-unit. I've actually lived in that building twice over the last 23 years. So it served my family really, really well. I mean, it's also made a great investment property for my family as well. You
mentioned 4-family units. Talk a little bit about that market in Sanford.
With residential investing, 4-family is the largest number you can buy for the number of units. And from a financing standpoint, and stay out of commercial lending. So 4 families tend to be very popular because for both owner occupants and investors, because it's a little easier to acquire with the financing that's available. It's more readily available. So they tend to be like highly sought after. And what's nice about 4-family from a owner occupant standpoint is that the income generally covers all your expenses. And then from an investment standpoint, they tend to cash flow really well because you have the four incomes coming in or 4 rents coming in that help offset the majority, if not all, of the expenses. So the cash flow on a 4-family tends to be really strong.
Best advice for somebody considering buying a 4-family and living in one of the units?
Best advice is really to focus on what your goals are. Is this something you're going to live in for 1 year, 2 years? Is it a stepping stone? Do you see yourself living there for, 5, 10, 15 years? Because that might really impact the type of building that you want to purchase. So you might, if you're going to live there for a really long term, the location might be really important, or other amenities like having a garage or having a yard so that either yourself or your family can enjoy some of the things that you tend to get when you purchase a single family home. If it's a stepping stone type building, the location might not be as important for you. And some of those other amenities might not be as important for you because it's, you're only going to live there for a short period of time. And then also, I think with any type of real estate purchase, the condition of the building becomes key as well. Are you looking for a fixer upper? Are you capable of making repairs to buildings? Do you have the extra resources financially to be able to make repairs? So should you be looking for a building that's kind of at the lower price points that might require some more work, or should you be looking at something that might be more towards the top of the price points that might have had all the work done to them?
I mentioned earlier that my daughter is a homeowner in the Sanford market, and that, frankly, she's got an awful lot of house for not an awful lot of money. And in her case, that was a new development. That's a homeowner situation and a relatively new street in Sanford. Talk a little bit about new versus existing properties in Sanford for multifamily.
We're seeing the majority of the new construction in Sanford when it comes to the residential side of things be single family homes. We are seeing a lot of development more on the commercial side. So I'd say Sanford has seen probably 150 plus or minus units built in the last couple of years in larger size buildings. So you're looking at like 18 units, 12 unit buildings. There was an 80 unit complex that was built. Now there's slated to be another like 200 to 300 units that are coming online in various stages of development. One's another 80 plus unit development that's occurring in an old mill building. And that same company is in the early stages of working on another one that's going to be close to 100 units. And then there's some that are going to be brand new builds instead of mill redevelopments that are, on paper that contractors and development companies are working on getting off the ground. So there's a lot of new housing in the multifamily arena being built in Sanford, but they tend to be larger buildings. As far as single family new construction goes, similar to what your daughter probably has gotten into, what makes Sanford attractive is just generally in Sanford, the median sales price is lower than the surrounding communities. So we have a single family median sales price around $370 right now. If you go to Wells or Kennebunk, which are two adjacent towns to us, that median sales price jumps up closer to $700,000. So new construction in Kennebunk, the entry might be $750,000, $800,000. In Sanford, you're going to be able to buy twice the size house, and it's going to be closer to $550,000. It really has to do with where the median sales price is, what the cost of land is in Sanford, the cost of development in general in Sanford. So that's what draws a lot of people to our community. Is you can get into a brand new house in Sanford for the same price that it might cost you in Kennebunk to get into a fixer-upper.
We've been talking about multifamily properties and first-time investors. Let's go the other way. Maybe somebody that's got some experience, maybe already owns some small multifamily properties. Talk about the Sanford community from a business and zoning standpoint for somebody like that.
Sanford has a really robust central government. They have a planning department and code enforcement department that has worked really hard to unify, and it's now under central leadership. So it's much smoother to take a project through development in Sanford because of the planning process and the cooperation that occurs between the planning department and the code enforcement office now. And that's been something they worked hard on over the last 10 years to accomplish. There's also a very cohesive process. I mean, there's always hurdles to get through when you're developing property, but the process of bringing together the water district and sewer district and the police department and the public works department, everybody who has a say in the development process, they've done and made a very good effort to kind of streamline that process and to get people information kind of all at the same time. So you're not getting information piecemeal. And by doing that, it helps larger investors keep their cost of development back because they're not constantly going back to the development stage of things in the planning stage of things to make changes that are requested upon them, because they're getting all of that information at one time or over the course of a few months, as opposed to individually from each one of those agencies. Sanford also has a rental housing ordinance on the books, which is designed to improve the safety and habitability of our older stock buildings. And it's a periodic check-in. So basically what you're doing is, as an investor, you're buying a license with the city of Sanford to be a landlord and to rent your rental units out. The rental units go through an inspection every 3 to 5 years. And what the city is looking for are really health and safety things that are based off of a 2003 property maintenance code and some fire codes that are from 2009 and 2013, if I remember correctly. They're just making sure that these properties are safe and that they meet a basic standard of maintenance, which isn't the same as having a home inspection done, but it's really kind of standardized the housing, and it's made people aware of defects that could be costly to a landlord, both from a liability standpoint and from just a general upkeep of their buildings.
General 3 to 5 year inspection of rental properties. Is that a unique thing for Sanford?
It's become more popular over the last decade in Maine in general. Other communities have variations of this program. I think Old Orchard was one of the first to have a licensing program, and that dates back maybe 30 or 40 years because they were a community of a significant number of seasonal rentals, and the city decided that they needed to have a little bit more oversight of what was going on in that arena. And then over the last 10 years or so, coming out of the recession that we had in the late 2000s, early 2010s, there were a lot of foreclosures that had been sold during that that time period and the upkeep of those buildings was pretty atrocious. So cities like Sanford and Waterville and Biddeford Saco and Portland and Lewis and Auburn, they all have different variations of this type of program. And Sanford, I would say, is a little bit like the program that's in Biddeford Saco is a little bit different than Sanford. Sanford is more geared towards adhering to 3 different ordinances, but it's not overly restrictive. And I think generally it's a good thing for both the tenants and the landlords because it keeps eyes on the properties and it makes sure, that basic standard of health and safety is being met. It works out to, I think, safer, cleaner neighborhoods. You have buildings that are maintained to a little bit higher standard, tenants that are living in the buildings and, keeping up with debris and garbage that might be accumulating on property. So all in all, I think it's been a positive for Sanford and for the older housing stock that we have. I'd say 75% of the housing in Sanford was built prior to 1950. So with that comes a lot of older stock buildings that need updating, basic updating, whether be electrical systems and heating systems and things of that nature, just to keep them modern enough to be safe.
Owning a multifamily property, even if you're Joe Handyman and you've got your own, monogrammed leather tool belt, at some point you're going to need some help from somebody. At some point you're going to have to call a guy to get something done. Talk about some of the contractors and the availability of services local to Sanford, some of the folks that you do business with or would recommend.
I found Sanford to have a decent number of trade folk that are doing everything from handyman work right up through skilled licensed work like plumbing and electrical. I've always found that working with like a small group of people that I can trust and rely on is very key to being a landlord, both for my own personal investment properties and for the management portfolio that I have within my management company when I'm managing for other people. Because when you don't have heat at midnight and it's 0 degrees outside, you need to be able to call somebody that is going to show up within a few hours to take care of that issue for you. If you have a plumbing leak and you can't put a Band-Aid on it yourself, you need a plumber that is going to get there the same day to help you with that, or you're going to have a building that doesn't have water, and that doesn't work very well when you have 2 or 3 or 4 families. And if you're a smaller landlord, relying on you to provide their services. So it just takes some time, but I really encourage investors, whether it's people that I'm selling properties to or people I'm managing for, to let us use a group of people and develop relationships and be loyal to your contractors so that you can get them to show up when you need them to. But I found Sanford has a great heritage of just hardworking people and hardworking contractors. There's many multi-generational families that are plumbers and electricians and builders in this area, and there's a lot of great handyman services to be found in this community.
For someone who perhaps is a first-time multifamily home buyer, what's the biggest pitfall? What's the biggest thing to watch out for?
I think it's underestimating the repair costs and the long-term expenses associated with owning property. When you own a single-family house, it's easier to put a Band-Aid on something or to live with a defect. When you're trying to secure high-quality tenants who are paying their rent on time and maintaining the rental unit that you're renting to them, that comes with a responsibility from the landlord as well to provide a quality unit for them to live in and to respond to maintenance needs in a timely fashion. And I think sometimes, people don't realize what that costs. So, a service call for a boiler might be $200 or $300, and a plumbing repair service call might be a couple $100, and that adds up pretty quick if your numbers are too tight from the beginning of the purchase. So I think it's really important to have a good budget for repairs that come up unexpectedly, and just know that the repairs are going to come up unexpectedly. So it shouldn't really be unexpected. It's something that you should be budgeting for and preparing for. And I think having a safety net in place too, in the form of an emergency fund, so that you can have those people come out when you need them is very important. Larger investors really look at something that's called CapEx. So when they're buying a building, a larger investor, they don't just look at the cost of the building and the income that it's going to generate and assume that as long as the income covers the expenses of the acquisition and the immediate operating expenses, that all is going to be good. When they really look at CapEx, what they're looking at is the cost to acquire the property. They're looking at the cost of any immediate upgrades that it's going to need, and they're actually looking at the cost of the long-term maintenance of that property as well, so that they can maintain it in the condition that they want to be able to maintain it in over like a 5 to 10 year time period. So I don't see a lot of smaller investors look at it that same way. And I think that's where people get into the biggest issues, is when they underestimate the cost of ownership.
Let's go back to the original example you used, that $425,000 duplex that perhaps the owner is living in one half of it and renting out the other half of it to offset expenses. How much money would that person, that owner, need to have in that emergency fund? What would be a good number?
I think if you can set $10,000 aside for expenses that come up, that you can pretty much make it through just about any unexpected repair that you may have. So the cost of a professionally installed electric hot water heater that meets the code standards in Sanford, right now is probably anywhere between like $1,700 and $2,300. So your hot water heater goes. The replacement of a boiler or furnace, that could be anywhere from $8,000 to $12,000 for like a base, something that's pretty basic that gets the job done for you. So those are the types of things that you need to be prepared for when you're a landlord, also maintaining those systems. So you can have an unexpected heating repair, that could cost you $500 to $800 in the middle of winter, and you need to get it done. So those are the types of repairs that we're thinking about, and that you want to be able to hedge against when you're a landlord.
All right, Brian, before we wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to touch on?
I think one of the keys to buying real estate and protecting your asset is, when you move into an area, especially if you're unfamiliar with the area yourself. In Sanford, we see that a lot. People start their search, in the greater Portland area or the greater Portsmouth area. And then they gravitate into Sanford because of housing affordability, right? Or they start investing, maybe in a market like Dover or Rochester, and then the prices in those areas start to outpace what they can either afford personally or what the rents can support. So they start moving to more affordable areas like Sanford, and they neglect to work with a professional in the area that really knows the market and specializes in that market. So I would encourage buyers to really find real estate agents that are working a lot in the area that they want to purchase in. So if they want to purchase in Sanford, find a Sanford agent who works and sells multifamilies regularly, because one, they're going to understand the regulations in the community that they're trying to purchase in. They're going to have connections to the contractors that you need to help with repairs down the road. They might even have connections to property management companies and tenants to help you be able to find people that are going to be good long-term tenants for you. So I think it's really important and I think I see it a lot. Buyers come into an area working with an agent that they work with in other areas of Maine that really don't understand the local communities. And, I over my 20-something year career, I found that to be true too. I work primarily in Sanford and Springvale. I know what's going on. I know what's happening, at the municipal level, regulatory. I have a really good idea of the strength of the rental market in this area at any given point in time. I understand where the prices are. But if I try to go work with a buyer in Lewis and Auburn, I have to re-educate myself, and I don't have 23 years worth of experience up there. So, but there is an agent that probably does have 23 years of experience in that Lewis and Auburn area that would be a much better resource to that buyer than I would, because of my lack of knowledge in that area. So I think that's really key. I also think it's key to have a home inspection done on these buildings when you're buying them, regardless of whether you're going to ask the seller to make the repairs for you or not. Having that knowledge going into it will help you develop your CapEx, so you'll know you'll be able to come up with a budget and a plan for your long-term expenses, and be able to work on, maybe you don't have to put the boiler in this year, but you do have to plan for that in the next 5 years, or maybe the roof has a couple of years left on it and you can save some money out of the rents over the next 3 to 5 years to be able to replace that. But it will help you make smarter decisions with the long-term ownership of that building.
Brian Samia, Century 21 Northeast Samia Realty Group, online at c21nesrg.com. We thank you so much for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
Excellent. Thank you for spending some time with me today, Mark.
For Let's Move to Maine, I'm Mark Erickson.